I'm Jesse Ventura. Stay vigilant and question more.
Welcome to my world. Come along for the ride.
The world according to Jesse. Today we reveal how many Americans will lose unemployment benefits by Christmas if Congress doesn't pass another economic relief package, and why civilian deaths in Afghanistan are on the rise. Sit tight, the show starts now. The world according to Jesse.
Hi, I'm Brigida Santos. We begin today on Capitol Hill, where Congress is working to pass a new COVID-19 economic relief bill before unemployment benefits expire for 12 million Americans the day after Christmas. Federal eviction moratoriums for over 30 million renters are also set to expire, along with federal paid family leave and student borrower protections. The newly proposed $908 billion bipartisan stopgap bill is expected to include $300 in additional federal unemployment benefits for 4 months. Now, that's half the previous weekly benefit. And the new bill does not include any one-time stimulus checks. This comes after House Democrats failed to pass their proposed $2.2 trillion package, and after Senate Republicans failed to pass their smaller $500 billion proposal. Now, Jesse, we're unlikely to see a full stimulus bill reached before Christmas. Meanwhile, 12 million unemployed Americans are heading into the holidays with an average of $5,800 in unpaid rent and utility bills. And by the end of the year, Feeding America estimates that 50 million Americans will experience food insecurity. Jesse?
Well, Brigitte, I'll tell you this. First and foremost, we need to understand one simple fact, and that is this: it's our money. Isn't it interesting how the government treats it like it's their money, and they're going to do a big favor to you and give you some money back, when the reality check is it's our money to begin with. We're the ones that provide it. You notice the elected officials lose track of that once they're elected. And you know, I got a great idea. I heard this the other day, I don't remember where. This would be a stimulus package, and it would also fight the COVID pandemic that we're dealing with right now. Why don't they pay people $1,000 to $1,200 when they get the vaccine? Hand them a check for $1,000. That way, everybody will get the vaccine. You'll get rid of the pandemic by using the vaccine, and people will get a stimulus package for getting the vaccine. It seems you could conquer two things with one stone on that, kinda, doesn't it? So that's my position on it. And you notice here, I'll give you a good transition, Brigida. We don't have no problem spending money on war, do we?
No, we absolutely do not. Now, many industries have ceased operations due to pandemic-related shutdowns, but the military-industrial complex is not one of them. It's thriving. This year, the U.S. has sold more than $175 billion in weapons to foreign governments, topping last year's sales by 3%. A defense agency director says the sales demonstrate the United States continues to be the global security partner of choice. Now, our government is arming the world with a military safety net, while our domestic social safety net is crumbling and people are literally going hungry.
Well, I'll tell you what. You know, again, let me go back to something. They call it the Department of Defense. Let's change the name and call it what it used to be called, the Department of War. Because there's no defense. You know, when you sell weapons to people, I love how they categorize them defensive weapons. Well, what's the exact difference between a defensive weapon and an offensive weapon? Only in the manner in which it's used. It's the same weapon either way. If it's a grenade launcher, you're launching a grenade in defense or in offense, but it's still the same grenade flying through the air, killing people. So let's call it what it is, the Department of War, and let's call this spending, it isn't defense spending, because you're telling me what's happening in Yemen is defense? I highly doubt if that's defense at all with the Saudis. That is offense. So let's get that straight right out of the get-go.
The number of Afghan civilians killed in American and coalition airstrikes have increased 330% since 2017. Researchers credit the rise to Washington's relaxed rules of engagement and, this year, to troop withdrawals. Now, U.S. airstrikes only decreased earlier this year when Washington made a deal with the Taliban. But with fewer U.S. forces on the ground, the Afghan military has now increasingly turned to the sky. And it's no surprise that so many civilians are killed. That's what happens when we export weapons and especially give them to our allies.
And, Brigitte, let's remember something else. We're pulling our troops out now. Let me give you the history lesson. That happened way back in 1972 with President Richard Nixon. Nixon, when he ran for office, promised to get us out of Vietnam. But what he didn't tell us was, yes, he's going to pull physical men out of Vietnam, ground troops out of Vietnam, but then he started carpet bombing them. Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, we dropped more bombs there on carpet bombing than we did in the entire World War II. And so he destroyed those three countries, which of course led to the Khmer Rouge coming down and committing genocide a couple years later. So this has happened before. When they pull the ground troops out, they increase the bombing, and the bombing is actually worse, way worse than the ground troops would have ever been.
In other military news, Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy has fired or suspended 14 officers and enlisted soldiers at Fort Hood after an independent review concluded that the base's leadership created a permissive environment for sexual assault and sexual harassment. The unprecedented disciplinary action comes in response to the deaths of at least 25 Fort Hood soldiers this year, including Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen, whose body was found in a shallow grave after she was bludgeoned to death on the base by another enlisted soldier. Guillen previously told her family that she'd been sexually harassed. Violence and misconduct have been documented at the troubled Texas base for years, including aggravated assault, robbery, kidnapping, homicide, rape, attempted rapes, child pornography, and 2 mass shootings. Now, if it weren't for the national response to Guillen's death, we may not have seen any kind of response from Secretary McCarthy, especially not one that's this big. Jesse?
Well, Brigitte, let me say this. Aren't these heroes? Haven't we labeled everybody that wears a uniform a hero? So in other words, heroes, let me go down your list here. Heroes are out there, robbery, homicide, kidnapping, child pornography, and 2 mass shootings done by, quote, heroes. I've been telling people for years now, serving in the military does not make you a hero. You're good at your job, but you do something else when you enlist. You take an oath. And with that oath comes an agreement that you will be an honorable person. The problem I see here is we are getting people in the military that obviously don't belong in there. Let's remember, the military is just a reflection of society. And you're going to get bad people getting in the military. I think they need to be looking at who they're allowing in the military now, because it's a professional military. Are they just filling quotas with anybody? Where they fill quotas with criminals? Are there criminals actually serving in our armed forces? You can bet there are, because it's no different than life in the real world. It's the same thing. It's a reflection. And what we need to do, what we got to look at here is you got to remember this also. They're trained to kill. That's the only thing you learn how to do in the military, is how to kill people. And you don't think that's going to carry over? It always does when you go through training like that. And then we're appalled when we see misbehavior happen. Oh my goodness, how did that happen? Well, when you train people to kill people, I think the first thing that Jesus said, or thou shalt not kill, you know, that came to me from somewhere, thou shalt not kill. And that's the main thing you do in the military, is kill. So what would you expect? We have to quit treating military people like heroes. They are regular people doing a job, and like all other regular people, they have their problems too.
Fort Hood is not the only troubled American military base. Now, this week, an autopsy report confirms that a Fort Bragg paratrooper who went missing in May was decapitated. The severed head of Enrique Roman Martinez had been found after he went missing during a camping trip with other soldiers over Memorial Day weekend. His death has officially been ruled a homicide, and the investigation is ongoing. And last week, the bodies of 2 more men were discovered at a Fort Bragg training area, an active duty soldier and a veteran. Their deaths are also being investigated as homicides. Jesse, as a former service member, what's your response to these incidents? Do you think there's something going on at the top? Because all these things seem to be happening on someone's watch, and no one seems to be doing anything until it's getting all this attention.
Well, obviously, again, it's a reflection of society, and they need to look at who they're allowing in the military now. And remember, you take an oath when you go in to serve with honor. This stuff is hardly honorable. So you got a lot of people serving in the military who have no honor. I faced 6 of them in my trial. They got up in their uniforms and sat and lied on the stand. It got embarrassing. It was so obvious. And yet they will do that because they protect each other. It's honor within themselves, not whether it's honor to honor what they should be doing. And let's remember this also. When you have commander-in-chiefs who do things, that's the head guy for all the military. Now, you got Donald Trump. He's out there pardoning war criminals, people who have committed crimes, committed murder, and the president, as commander-in-chief, pardons them. And this isn't the first time that this stuff happens. Pardoning and all that stuff goes hand in hand with the ability to serve and how you think when you serve. Look at 2001. We had a President Bush and Cheney who both committed war crimes. They allowed torture. In fact, they advocated for torture. That's a war crime. Well, when your top people are doing it, then you can't sit around and blame the underlings or the knuckle draggers for misbehaving when your head of the whole government is misbehaving.
It's time for a break. When we return, Jesse sits down with a former special agent and military intelligence officer who now lives the simple life off the grid. We'll be right back.
The world according to Jesse.
Gary Collins is the host of Your Better Life podcast. He is a best-selling author, simple living expert, and a former special agent and military intelligence officer. He joins me now to talk about his experiences in living off the grid. And I know a little something about that because I live off the grid. Gary, in your experience, has there been a growing interest in going off the grid or learning survival skills in these recent years?
Oh, absolutely. This year, obviously, it's been really big. When I first started probably 10 years ago, people thought I was nuts. As I'm sure you know, 15 years, you've been doing it a long time too. Now everyone's asking me how I did it. And I wrote a book about it 4 years ago called Going Off the Grid that's been a bestseller for years on Amazon now. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Now, has interest in this lifestyle increased, obviously, during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah. Up where I'm at in Northeast Washington, people are flooding in and they're trying to figure out how to live off the grid. So I've been getting a lot of emails, a lot of requests for interviews on how I've done it and how to do it. You know how it is. It's a little more complicated than that.
Now, why do you think people are interested in living off the grid? Is it a desire to feel self-reliant and escape the stress and confines of the pandemic?
Absolutely. I think people are realizing, like we did a long time ago, that this kind of noisy go-go society is a little bit overrated. And getting away from things and living the life you want is a much better way to go if you can do it. The problem is most people have no clue where to start.
Now, what got you interested in living off the grid? Did your background in the military influence your decision?
Well, it was a host of things. I grew up very poor in the middle of nowhere in a trailer. So I grew up with not much. And, looking back as I got older and was an agent and traveling all over the world, I realized that lifestyle wasn't all that bad. And it kind of obviously being in the government and traveling around the world and seeing things from the inside out, I just realized if we're waiting for these politicians to solve our problems, we're in for a rough life. And so I said, you know what? I've had it. A couple things happened in Southern California where I was at, to include raising our water rates after telling us to conserve water. We did such a good job. It cut their bottom line. So they raised all of our rates. And I went, this is it. I'm done. I don't want to have to deal with this.
Now, some people are downsizing from traditional housing today to living and traveling in a van or an RV. Can you talk about the motivation for what is known as this nomadic lifestyle? Is it to avoid home mortgages and other hefty debts you get by owning a house?
Absolutely. I'm doing this from my RV. I live part of the year in my RV, part of the year in my off-grid house. This is how I like to live. I'm changing things up as we discussed in the near future. But yeah, I get a lot of inquiries about nomadic living, mobile living as well. People, a lot of authors, I'm an author, so a lot of authors like doing this because they can write, roam around the country. It's a lot cheaper. You don't have, all the insurance cost of being a homeowner. Not only that, but all the maintenance. And you're trapped. I think a lot of people, as jobs have become more fleeting and not as stable, realize that that house is an anchor. And if you lose your job, well, now you've got this house. Now what do you do? And I think a lot of people are realizing it's better to be mobile if they can.
You know what I find interesting when I go off the grid is my lifestyle changes to where the only thing I'm concerned with is what's in my visual eyesight, nothing beyond that. Now, while living off the grid offers a simpler life, it isn't necessarily easier. People might find out the hard way that living off the grid has its own difficulties, doesn't it?
And that's what I write about. That's how I wrote the book, from a perspective of the everyday person going off grid, not these fancy TV shows that make it look like you can do it in 60 minutes. But yeah, what I tell people is it's physically arduous. You can't just go up there completely out of shape, build a house off the grid. No, there's no one. You got to split your own wood. You're your own power center, your own utility company. And you got to walk up hills and get around and move stuff around. I go, if you come up there and you think you're just going to hang out in your robe all day, you're in for a rude awakening. And actually, the off-grid lifestyle is littered with people who think they were going to do that. Or better yet, live in a tent and hang out all day.
Hey, you can live in the robe all day. I just got news for you. It's going to get awful dirty, that robe, by the time the day's over. Anyway, off-the-grid lifestyles can be cheaper as they bypass utility bills. But what are some of the expenses to being off the grid?
Well, right now, I've drilled a couple wells. I'm getting ready to drill another one. But you're your own utility company, so you have to put in your infrastructure. If you want to not poop in a bucket, you need to put in a septic system. You're going to have to put in a well if you want water, if you don't have a running creek or anything like that. Your solar is a lot cheaper than it used to be. I buy I can't believe how cheap panels are today, but you still have to buy that equipment. And so there is an upfront cost, and that's what I teach a lot in my writings and what I do. I tell people you need two things. You need money and a plan. That's how you make it going off grid. If you don't have those two, you're doomed.
Now, not everyone has the opportunity to live off the grid due to where they work or other limitations. What are some ways people can incorporate that liberating feeling into their lives regardless of where they live?
And that's why I have a book series called The Simple Life. And what I did is I wrote that for everyday people. The off-grid stuff's more niche-y, more for people who are looking to take it up another notch. But the three-legged stool of the simple life is optimal health, be as healthy as you possibly can be, live financial freedom by being debt-free, and find your life purpose. And I tell people those are the three things that you can do anywhere you live, no matter what your socioeconomic background, no matter where you're at in life. And those are the three things that I tell that we have willingly given to big corporate America and the federal government that we can take back that will drastically change our life for the better.
Well, I'll tell you, Gary, I love my life off the grid. Like I said, it changes me from having to look at everything happening around the world. All I concentrate is the world is what I can see. And I'll tell you, that is a feeling that everybody needs to get into their bodies again. Gary, I appreciate your insight. Thank you for your time today. Stay safe out there off the grid, and hopefully many more of us will be joining you in that endeavor. I know I'm not going to quit.
I hope so, and thanks for having me on, Jesse. I really appreciate it.
The world according to Jesse.
Let's turn to the viewers. We asked people on social media, are you struggling financially due to the pandemic? What do you want the next stimulus package to include? Sal says, I'm struggling. I had to start a GoFundMe for medical bills, doctor bills, car insurance, phone bills, etc. All these things cost money. There are no jobs with this epidemic. It's not safe. I want to be able to pay bills and go to a school that I'm interested in. I guess Christmas won't help. Jesse?
Well, you know, he's one of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of sad stories out there. And our government needs to react, and they need to take the politics out of it. The people of the United States of America are hurting right now, and you elected officials are not hurting. You're getting your paychecks, you got your health insurance, everything's hunky-dory for you. Why don't you start doing your jobs and looking out for the people like the gentleman that just sent that in?
Goldwolf says, open up or close everything and send every citizen a $10,000 check monthly at the expense of the war budget. Our taxes should not be spent murdering innocent people abroad. It should be helping us avoid catching a virus that's killing millions. We can't stay home if we've got to work.
Hey, I agree wholeheartedly with him. I think that's a great answer. I mean, I don't know about the 10 grand because I haven't done the mathematics on it or anything like that. But I'm actually in favor, absolutely. We need to take care of our people first, not take care of the war budget, not take care of fighting international wars throughout the world. That's what destroyed Rome, and it'll destroy us too.
And David says, no more stimulus. Federal fake money is preventing state governors from opening fully and are causing damage to the economy. They must feel the heat in order to reverse their terrible executive orders that are doing long-lasting damage.
Well, I disagree with him wholeheartedly. You got to take care of this pandemic first before you take care of the economy. It's the pandemic that's causing the problem with the economy. If you don't fix the pandemic, the economy's going to die with it. You have to fix the pandemic because the economy can't survive with the pandemic. He wants to lift everything. Can you imagine that? Our hospitals will be overwhelmed. They won't have room. People will be dying at home. They'll be calling 911 for ambulances, and they'll be told, stay home. That person's an idiot. Just like all of them are idiots that tell you that masks don't work. They do work, and stop listening to idiots.
Thanks for watching. Send us your comments on Facebook and Twitter for a chance to be featured in next week's episode. As always, we'll see you then when we cover more stories ignored by the corporate media.
And remember, when the government lies, the truth, of course, becomes a traitor. Wear your mask. Stay vigilant.
The world according to Jesse.